interesting to be here at the show and really to talk about what is the future of EVs.
10 years ago, there was probably 4 or 5 commercially available mass-produced electric vehicles that you could buy. Some of them horrendously expensive, some of them less so. There is now, I think it's 148 that are available in this country. So that's happened in 10 years. So in another 10 years, that number can only be, it's going to be over 200, 250 different makes and models of electric vehicles. But in a sense, that doesn't tell you everything, does it?
Well, there's one category that's conspicuously absent, and that's cheaper cars.
Yeah.
So we've got used electric vehicles, and that market is starting to grow. People will come forward with cheaper electric cars, but at the moment, the message that the market is sending is we like SUVs. We're prepared to pay a lot of money for them. And actually what we would say is if we move from combustion engine SUVs to electric SUVs, we probably fail. We need to try and encourage people to have fewer cars, lighter cars, more shareable cars. And I think that will come, but at the moment, I think the establishment automakers, who we love, we work with a lot of them, are just caught in a little bit of a tricky situation. If you make smaller cars, you're going to have smaller profit margins generally. They're already trying to factor in the battery and the supply chain of the battery into their business model, and it isn't as economic as the model they probably had before. So if you're a clean slate manufacturer like Tesla, it is a little bit easier. If you're a legacy manufacturer, it's much harder. But they want to start with the more profitable vehicles. I totally get it, but they're kind of locked in their own cycle, I think, and they maybe struggle to get out of it. But, and this is the point, there are some fantastic Korean challenger brands who are going to come up with cheaper cars, and we know from our experience there are a lot of Chinese companies and brands that might seem British but are made in China that will bring cheaper and cheaper options to the market.
So why is it? Why are electric cars that much more expensive? Where does the cost come from?
I mean, I think there's no question. Originally, it was the battery. So the battery cost was a huge, much higher, and it's dropped by what was it, like about 80%. But what's happened is instead of them putting in the same size batteries as companies were 10 years ago, i.e. around 20, 24 kilowatt hours, they're putting in 60, 70, 80 kilowatt hour batteries, same size, pretty much same weight, but much more energy, in the meaning you've got greater range. So therefore, the reduction in unit cost of those batteries is not reflected in the end cost of the vehicle. So although they have got cheaper, and I think in the long run they will get cheaper, and there's still discussions going on about when there'll be the crossover, when a combustion engine vehicle will be more expensive than an electric one, which I think is inevitable, but it's probably been delayed a bit because of the supply constraints that everyone is going through, and all manufacturing, not just vehicles, in fact, everything is affected by that. But I think that will resolve itself eventually. And it's very hard to judge whether, if you're a big manufacturer and you're making a profit from selling combustion vehicles, and that profit is being eaten away. I mean, Porsche is the best example. What is stopping people buying petrol-powered Porsches? Electric Porsches. They all want to buy those. The same customers who in the past would always have bought the petrol Porsche are now buying the electric one, but for one reason only: it's better. And that is really, really difficult for that. So you would then subtly adjust the price up of the electric one and subtly adjust the price down. So I think there is a bit of that going on with all manufacturers. They're maintaining a slightly higher price for the electric vehicles, which is harder for them to make a profit on, also because of the lifetime of the vehicle. If you sell someone a petrol car and you sell it through a dealership, and that dealership has a servicing department, you've got an income for the next at least 5 years from that car, from all the servicing you have to do. I've had electric cars for 12 years. They don't need servicing, not to anything like the same degree. It's so it's a different business model, which the old combustion engine vehicle manufacturers are adjusting to. It's really hard. I actually feel very sympathetic to them because it's a really tough change they've got to do.
Yeah, I think slightly more controversially, I think these are huge organisations with an awful lot of mouths to feed as well.
Yeah.
And so if you took a big manufacturer, let's pick on one, for example, like Toyota, they are the world's biggest car company. With that comes a huge amount of their own employees, whether it's through from the people who actually make the cars through to the people who advertise them. There's a huge group of people. And there's also the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 suppliers that make a living out of supplying Toyota. But actually that cost is kind of almost is not represented, it's being kind of moved across to the electric car kind of infrastructure as well. So you've seen quite a lot of car companies split divisions. So they've had, you know, Hyundai, for example, is, you know, really going for it with electric under the kind of Ioniq brand. You know, Polestar, which is Volvo, but is owned by Geely in China, is a separate brand. So they're all wrestling with what is, I think, well, not an easy task.
It's an existential dilemma in a sense for them. And I mean, Renault just announced that they're not guaranteed to, but they are very seriously considering splitting the electric car section. So there'll be Renault Electric, totally separate company to Renault Combustion, and Ford are discussing the same thing. So the whole industry is going through convulsions, and it's very difficult to predict where that'll end up. But I think we are inevitably going to end up with some brands that we all know not existing or being absorbed into other companies. I think it's just inevitable, I think, because the change is so huge.
So one of the things that people are really interested in, of course, is our battery, you know, you've touched on the fact that the range is getting better all the time, and we're appreciating that. But when we look ahead, is there going to be another mismatch between how quickly they can charge? You know, we're hearing all about these superchargers that are going to be alongside the road, which is all very well, but what if our car can't take them?
The good thing is you can use them, but your car won't charge as fast as a car possibly can. So I mean, I've plugged in you know, an old Renault Zoe into a charger that can deliver 250 kilowatts. Well, it didn't to the Renault Zoe because it wasn't built to take it, but it still does charge at the maximum that it can do.
Is it the Taycan that can charge technically at 350?
I think, yes, 350, and Teslas can technically charge at 250.
I think there comes an optimal point at which they go, actually, that's fast enough for cars, and that's the big enough battery for cars. And, you know, 300 miles has actually changed a lot of people's perceptions, but I think 350, 400 will pretty much seal the deal, apart from people who do enormously high mileage. And then in terms of speed of charge, I think it will get a little bit faster, but I think there comes a point at which it becomes uneconomic, because obviously you've not only got to put the charger in, but you've got to factor in what the grid is capable of in that particular place as well. So we're not quite there yet. I think another 3 or 4 or 5 years of progress, but there does come a point at which most people don't need, almost no one needs a 500-mile electric car. They might think they do, but as long as the charging system is good enough, they don't really need it. I think the single biggest mismatch is that car design typically takes 7 years to sort of design a car, and I think consumers are ready, and those that aren't ready are almost ready, and you're going to see massive demand. But some of the car companies are a little bit behind still. So some are absolutely up to date, they're really, really advanced, and others aren't. So you've got that slight mismatch where the whole industry isn't quite in it yet. So in terms of agreeing standards, it's really important, for example, that BMW are at the table. But BMW have made some comments recently which indicates that they think, you know, petrol, is here to stay for a long period of time. And I think, unfortunately, they've got their heads slightly in the sand about what is actually going to happen over the next 5 years.